How do I tell my fiance that I'm not attracted to him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. My fiance and I met in school over 10 years ago. We started running in the same friend circle, and after that we became best friends. Now, I will say I always knew that he had a thing for me, but he was always so soft and gentle. He was always my best friend that I could tell everything to. And when it came to guys, he always gave me the best advice. I knew he had my back always. After high school, he went away for college and I stayed home. And I started dating a ton of guys. Of course, I kept him updated on everybody I was dating. During the summer, he came to visit us, and that's when I realized he had a huge glow up. But he was still the same guy. He asked me if we could go to dinner, the movies. Essentially, they were like mini dates. And the more I hung out with him, the more I thought, okay, maybe I am attracted to him. At least I wanted to believe it. I mean, he'd be the perfect man for me. We know each other so well. He makes me laugh. He cares about me. My family already loves him. So I decided to give him a chance. This might sound bad, but his glow up was kind of like a trick. It tricked me into believing that I was attracted to him, so then I tricked myself into believing that I could be with him. When he asked me to be his girlfriend, I said yes. But anytime he tried to kiss me, I would always feel weird. He finally had to go back to college, and this is when I had to muster up the courage to finally kiss him. And so I did. It was not a good kiss. In fact, I didn't feel anything. But I continued to trick myself into believing that I'll feel something for him eventually. He was so in love with me. All he did was talk about me, always texting me, calling me. He was the perfect boyfriend. A year later, he actually proposed. And at this point, I had convinced myself long enough that I liked him. So I said yes. But as we started planning, I realized I am not attracted to him at all. Part 2 is how do I confess to my fiance that I'm not attracted to him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. He planned out the most amazing proposal. He took me down to a lake where we used to hang out with all our friends. As we started getting closer to the lake, there was a pathway of candles. And as soon as I saw those candles, I knew that he was going to propose. And the worst part is the whole time he was proposing, I just kept looking at his face trying to figure out if I'm attracted to him or not. Or if what I feel is just love of a friend that I've loved for years. I was so confused and I didn't know how to say, I don't know. So instead I said yes. Both of our families were right there hiding. They came out and congratulated us. My parents actually could not be happier. They love my fiance. How could they not? He's been my best friend for 10 years. I felt like I was in a racing car and I couldn't pump the brakes. Everything was happening so quickly and I couldn't say, hold on. Like, let me think about this. I was so confused and torn up, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I also didn't want to hurt my own feelings. I opened up to my mom and told her exactly how I felt. And she says, I'm not surprised. When I asked her why, she told me that she knew he was never my type of guy, but she knew that he could grow to be one. And that the love he and I feel for each other is just as important as the love a husband and wife might feel. But I explained to her that even though, yes, I truly deeply love him, I'm just not attracted to him. And she confessed that when her and my dad got engaged, she wasn't even in love with him, let alone attracted to him. But she says that all of that came with time. And that all we see in movies is people falling head over heels, having the best sex and the best relationships, and that I needed to realize it was only in movies. After talking to my mom, I felt worse about the entire situation. I was no longer confused. I knew I definitely was not attracted to him. And part of me knew that I would never come to be attracted to him. We had already been together a year at this point, and I still felt nothing when he kissed me. I felt like a liar, felt guilty. Then something happened. A friend group set up a whole party and they wanted us to come. But there were a couple of people that we had never met. And like a scene straight out of a movie, I see this guy from across the room and he looks at me. Instant attraction. I can't even describe it. It's like I just couldn't stop looking at him. And he couldn't stop looking at me either. Every time I looked in his direction, he was always looking at me. Then one of our friends introduced us, as in me and my fiance, to this guy. He was new to the friend group and he had just moved into town. This is what I'm talking about. I want to feel those feelings for whoever I end up marrying, instead of guilt and pity. I told my parents I was going to break off the engagement, but they want me to reconsider. And no, I haven't had any contact with that guy, obviously. The feeling he gave me, isn't that what I should be feeling for my fiance? I'm speaking to him tonight, so I will be posting a third part to this story time tomorrow. Wish me luck and give me some tips on what I should say to him. Don't want to hurt him, but I know he's going to get hurt anyway. And I don't want to lie to him. I just want to tell him the truth. I'm not attracted to you. But how do I say that without making him feel like he's ugly or something? Help me out. Talk your sister out. I confessed to my fiance that I'm not attracted to him. You'll never guess what he did. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. You guys tore me to shreds in the comments of the last video, so I did exactly what you guys said. I went to his apartment and confessed the whole thing. I told him that I loved him, but like a best friend. And that really at no point did I ever really feel attraction for him. You'll never guess what he said. He said that he already knew, but that he didn't care because he knows that I would come to love him too. I felt even worse after he said this. He begged me to stay, but ultimately I said no and broke up with him. Luckily, we hadn't spent any money on the wedding planning, but our families were really upset. His mom called me really angry and told me off, which of course didn't surprise me, but it stung like hell. I'm currently public enemy number 1, and everyone in our friend group hates me. Like, actually, none of my friends want to talk to me right now. I feel miserable, but it took guts to do what I did. A lot of people stay in relationships like this because they're comfortable. So be as mean as you want in the comments, I don't care. I'm going to Mexico for 4 days. My plan is to run around in a bikini all day. I'm currently miserable, so you'd be happy to know. Send me your stories on Instagram. Self-care sister out. Am I wrong for thinking my sister-in-law is a bitch? She convinced me not to wear makeup to my prom. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. Slowly but surely, I think my sister-in-law has been sabotaging me, and I don't understand why. She's dating my brother, why does she have to be jealous of me? At least I think she is. Well, this all started a while ago, and I think I've been really paranoid about it. When I talk to my family about it, especially my brother, he says that I'm going crazy, and that she would never do that. So let me start from the beginning. My brother and her started dating 2 years ago, and at first, of course, she would come over to our house and try to impress us all, but I had no reason to not like her. In fact, I liked her a lot. I love the way she treated my brother, and I love the way that they were in love. You could just tell they were good for each other. They also weren't toxic at all. Every time I open my phone, I see a story about a toxic relationship, and they are so far from that. The point is, I was really happy for them, but when Christmas came around, she gave everyone in my family a gift. We're a family of 5, my brother and I and my parents, and our beautiful pup. She got everyone, including the pup, a gift except for me. Her excuse for that was that she didn't know what to get me because I'm so picky. Why would she say that I'm picky? And she also said it in front of my family. I looked at my mom and my mom looked at me, and we shared the look, you know? Around this time, there was a boy that was paying attention to me, and I told my brother about it, and my brother always gives me the best advice. Of course, he went and told her everything. So she came back to me and told me that I shouldn't even try to date boys right now, and that whatever this guy's trying to do is probably only to manipulate me. I asked her why she thought that, and she said that him trying to DM me on Instagram is not proof that he wants a real relationship. That's when I told her that I didn't even know if I wanted a relationship with this boy. We were just talking through DM. And she told me I was too gullible. That conversation made me feel so bad. She made me feel insecure, and she made me think that he wasn't a good person for DMing me. After that, I didn't trust her. I kept my distance, and she noticed. She started complaining to my brother that I was being mean to her. Then my brother got mad at me. He asked me to please be nice to her because she was sensitive. When I explained to him what she said to me, he said that she was just looking out for me. My parents thought that I was being difficult. She managed to turn everyone against me. But it gets so much worse. Go to part 2. Am I wrong for thinking my sister-in-law is a bitch? Disclaimer, this is not my story time, part 2. After managing to turn everyone against me and my family, she had to hit me even harder. Me being the nice person I am, and because my brother and my parents were upset at me, I extended her an olive branch. I invited her to a Galentine's I was hosting at my house with all my friends. I was very specific in the invitation about what you should wear. I said bring your cute jammies, or a cute robe, or something comfortable. She showed up in a super long tight maxi dress, heels, and a full face of makeup. She even wore her extensions. And I know when she wears them because she has short hair, but she came with long hair. She looked ridiculous. Oh, and really quickly, my friends already knew the situation between her and I. So one of my friend says to her, I don't think you read the dress code. That's when I quickly said, it's okay, she looks great. Then obviously all my friends started telling her how amazing she looked, and she turned around so that we could see the full dress. Of course, that night she was on her best behavior because she didn't want us and my friends to notice how much of a bitch she is. You know, she was in disguise. Prom was in a few weeks and I still didn't have a dress. Oh, and by the way, the boy that was DMing me on Instagram, he was gonna be my date, and we were just like casually dating. He was so sweet, and even my family liked him, by the way. I knew for my makeup I wanted something beautiful and ethereal with crystals. You see, my dress was inspired by a ballerina dress. I trained in ballet for years, so I knew I wanted this. Even my date wanted to wear pink because my dress was pink. It was all so perfect. My mom found the most amazing makeup artist, and when I saw her work, I knew she was exactly the makeup artist I wanted. Everything she did was ethereal and soft and blushy and pink. But then my brother came over for dinner with his girlfriend, and when my mom showed her the makeup artist, she started criticizing everything the makeup artist did. She had posted some videos on YouTube, and she went through the video, paused it, and showed us every little thing that she was doing wrong, in her opinion. Let me remind you, she's not a makeup artist. That's when she went on a rant about how bad a full face of makeup looks on prom night, and how the pictures are gonna look horrible because they have flash. That if they put the wrong shade of powder and foundation, it's gonna look terrible. Then she started to convince me that I should just use skincare, and that because of my dress, it would go perfectly. She even showed me examples of what kind of skincare looks I should do. I mean, she showed me a girl putting on skincare on Instagram. At that point, I was just so sick of her talking that I was like, yeah, sure, I could do that. As the weeks passed, I didn't book the makeup artist and my mom didn't either. I was really busy with tests and studying, so by the time prom came around, I had no makeup artist. This This is when I started looking at tutorials and I realized I cannot do my makeup like that. So then I looked at my skincare cabinet and I was like, okay, I guess I could do some skincare. I showed up to prom with just skincare on. And in the pictures, I look terrible, oily, and greasy. She was so wrong. When I look at my friends' pictures, they all look beautiful with full faces of makeup on because they all went to professional makeup artists. I didn't feel as pretty as I could have on prom night, telling me I looked pretty. I am done talking to my sister-in-law. My mom is also angry at her too. If she does anything else, I'll come and tell you guys. Self-care sister out. My new wife got me into $130,000 of debt. What should I do? Disclaimers, is not my story time. It was sent me on Instagram. I was a 30-year-old man and I was single, but I was desperate for a wife. My best friend lives in Montenegro and he says that the women there are beautiful. I decided to go visit him and just meet some girls. This is when I met my current wife. Best friend took me to this party and there were like 20 women there. All beautiful, all amazing, but my wife stuck out to me because she came up to me first. We had a great time talking. At the end of the night, my best friend tells me that this party was for men to go meet women. Essentially, men with money go meet women and then they marry them. And the women go back to wherever the men live. It sounds terrible, right? But I was desperate. All my siblings are married and have kids, and I still didn't even have a girlfriend. And the biggest part of this is I was set to inherit money once I got married. My aunt had left me $70,000, and my parents told me that that money would come to me when I got married. Essentially, that money would serve as a down payment for a house or something. But like I said, I was desperate. After 3 days of hanging out with this woman, I asked her to marry me, because that's how it's supposed to go. We get back to where I live and fast forward 2 months. She just goes shopping every single day. She doesn't just go shopping to the mall. She shops online. Essentially, she got herself a whole new wardrobe. Not just any wardrobe. She's obsessed with Balenciaga for some reason. I don't even know what that is. She got herself a Louis Vuitton purse. She asked me for a car, which I did get her one because she actually did need one. Out to dinner at least once a week, and she wanted me to take her on vacation. Spent $25,000 taking her to the Bahamas. Essentially, I gave her everything she wanted. When my parents realized what was happening, they said that they would not give me the inheritance if I married this woman. Even my siblings tried to talk me out of marrying her. This is when I was really faced with the truth. My accountant calls me one day and asks me if I'm okay. That's when he breaks it to me that I'm more than $130,000 in debt. And when I told him why, he told me that I needed to break up with her immediately. To be honest, I don't know what to do though. I mean, our relationship is pretty good and I don't have any other prospects, but I really need that money I'm supposed to inherit. My family thinks I'm crazy for doing what I'm doing, but I actually can't afford to have this relationship. This is when I told my fiance that she needed to spend less money. She threatened to break up with me and told me that that's not what she signed up for, and that she could find any other man to give her the lifestyle she needs. I was ready to break up with her, but when she said this, I felt insecure and I wanted to be with her even more. So we went to the court and got married the next day. Am I being completely played? Am I really that dumb? Family say they won't speak to me until I get a divorce. She still goes shopping every day. What should I do? Self-care sister out. I hooked up with my stepbrother and now he's blackmailing me. What should I do? Disclaimers, and I started telling me on Instagram. Yes, I admit it. I'm an absolutely vile human being for hooking up with my stepbrother. Okay, but he's really, really hot. We're both 18, but this all went down when we were 17. A little backstory. My parents got divorced 5 years ago, and this affected me severely. I was so angry at them for separating us. I began to have a lot of anxiety about it. My dad was the one to move out of the house, so my mom and I tried to make the best of it. Not 2 months after their divorce was finalized, my mom met another guy, and he was the perfect man. He was really good looking and the CEO of a huge company. My mom's 45 and he's actually 10 years older than her. Being the angry teen that I was, I didn't want to accept it. She invited him over so that we could meet, but I was pretty much an asshole the entire time. To be honest, after the dinner, I actually ended up liking him. He was really funny, he made my mom laugh, and he understood my humor. All of this, of course, made my mom really happy. A few days later, this man calls me and tells me that he wants to propose to my mom. So he essentially wanted to get my permission first. So I said yes. That's when he moved in with his son. Part 2 is up. I hooked up with my stepbrother and now he's blackmailing me. That's when my mom's new fiance and his son were moving into our house. I decided that I would try to make the best of it. I was always so angry that I just needed to give myself a break. And the first time that I met him was when he moved in. As soon as he came in through the door, I was literally speechless. He was so hot. Like the best looking guy that I had ever seen in my life. I'm sorry, you guys, I have hiccups right now. And we couldn't stop looking at each other. We all sat down to have lunch, and he and I just stared at each other the entire time. That's when my stepdad told us that after the wedding, we were all moving to a new house. Like I said, he has a lot of money, and I was actually really excited about this. A new house meant a new start. But guess what? My stepbrother started coming to the same school that I did. So we would basically go to school together every single day. That's when we both found out that we had so much in common. While we drove to school, he would always turn to look at me, and I would ask what's up, and he would say nothing. But one night he came into my room and he kissed me. Part 3 is up. So there I am making out with my stepbrother in my own bed. Mind you, I was asleep when he came in. As soon as I realized he was kissing me, I got out of bed. That's when he told me that he knew that we were both attracted to each other and that we should just do it. I stayed quiet and I didn't know how to respond. I felt super shy and embarrassed. Then he grabbed me and kissed me again. I told him to leave my room and he did. But after that, the sexual tension was real. I always caught him staring at me. Even at school, he would stare at me. And he would go out of his way to bump into me. One day we were driving home and he pulls over on a deserted road. He started kissing me and I couldn't resist. We ended up making out in his car for like an hour. After that, he told me that he wanted me to be his girlfriend, but in secret, and that he didn't want our parents to find out. But I said no because it's wrong. We live in the same house and our parents are married to each other. Of course, he got angry. Now he just grabs me and kisses me whenever he wants. And he says that I am his girlfriend even if I don't want to. And he told me that if I don't accept, he'll tell his dad about us. I really like him, but I think it's wrong. What should I do? My boyfriend kicked me out of his car at 1 in the morning and left me there. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I went to a party and got into a huge fight. Here's a little backstory on our situation. This boy chased me for months. And let me just say, he was never my type. I did not find him attractive. I didn't even think he was funny. Friends introduced us, and after he met me, he was completely obsessed. I knew and everybody knew that I was way out of his league, but he just started doing really sweet things. For example, he'd show up to my job with the Starbucks. First, I thought it was creepy that he would show up to my job. Then I found out he worked 2 blocks away from me, so it was actually pretty sweet. He would invite all of us friends to his place, and then he'd have a special dinner for me because I have celiacs, so I can only eat gluten-free and he would only make me gluten-free food. After him trying to ask me out for 3 months, I finally caved in and said yes. This is where it gets me angry. Like, this is a boy that I had zero interest in. Yet I fell in love and became obsessed, and now I'm the one suffering? How is this fair? 6 months into the relationship, everything was pretty much okay, until he started getting jealous of everybody, even our existing friends. We went to this party and my best friend introduced me to her new boyfriend, and I actually know her boyfriend from years ago, so he and I were talking, but my boyfriend got angry, grabbed me by the arm and dragged me out of the party. Got in the car and we argued for an hour. We were an hour from my home. He kicked me out of the car and left me there. At 1 in the morning. Go to part 2. My boyfriend kicked me out of his car and left me there. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time and sending me on Instagram. As we were fighting in the car, I asked him why he was so jealous and he said that he couldn't stand people even looking at me. I told him that reaction was unreasonable and not normal. And when I said the word normal, he got so angry he stopped the car, opened my door, and pulled me out. He pulled me out so quickly I fell onto the floor. Then he just drove away. Mind you, I'm 1 hour away from my house. It is literally 1 in the morning. And my battery was on 2%. Quickly grabbed my phone and called my best friend who's still at the party. She answers and I said to her, he kicked me out of the car, come pick me up, I'm sending you my location, and I hung up. I sent her my location. 30 seconds later, my phone dies. At this point, I have no idea if anybody's coming for me. This man drove by and stopped and asked me if I needed a ride. But honestly, he terrified me. He had a beer bottle in his lap. And he laughed when he saw me. He said, "Are you lost?" I told him I was waiting for friends, and then he laughed even harder. He said, "I'll just wait here with you." But I told him if he didn't mind to please leave me alone. That's when he called me a bitch and drove away. Also, I'm standing in the middle of a road with barely any lights, so it's like super dark. Every little noise I heard was scaring the life out of me. Picture me. I'm there clutching my purse and my phone, making 360 turns just to make sure nobody's coming up behind me. And finally, my best friend shows up. She is angry. She said to me, "You're breaking up with him. I don't care what he says." She drove me home and the next morning my boyfriend shows up. And guess what? He's acting like nothing happened. When I open the door and he walks in, I say, "Do you remember what you did?" And all he said was, "Yeah, let's talk about it." Let's talk about it? This man kicked me out of his car at 1 in the morning, knowing my battery was on 2%, putting my life in danger. And he wants to talk about it? I required all the patience that Virgin Mary could give me. That's when he apologized and said that he was completely out of line. And I said, "You think?" And then, of course, I started to cry and I told him everything that happened after he kicked me out of the car. And he started crying. He said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't even think about that." I also made him call my best friend to apologize to her as well, which he did, and my best friend did not accept the apology and she hung up on him. Then I told him he didn't even call me later on that night to see if I got home okay. Really, was he that angry that he just did not care about what happened to me? But here's the problem. I'm still so in love and obsessed. But my best friend and I agreed that I would not get back with him. I told him I couldn't accept him back into my life because clearly he doesn't care enough and he doesn't have my back. Then he started to cry some more and left. He's been showing up to my house every day with flowers and everything that I like. But I'm confused, angry, and I just really don't know what to do. Am I overreacting or am I not reacting enough? Should I just cut contact with him? Please help me out. Self-care sister out. Bye. My mother-in-law treats me like a maid. After the arranged marriage, my new husband told me that we were going to go live with his parents. Mind you, I had no idea this was the plan before we got married. I was completely against it. I wanted to stay close to my parents, and ideally live with my husband on our own. But in our religion, it's very normal to live with parents. Now, really quickly, because I'm sure you guys are wondering, did I even like my new husband? Absolutely not. I mean, I thought he was okay looking, I was not in love with him, and I didn't really know him that well. Because this was an arranged marriage, it's not like our parents were worried about us actually liking each other. I was 25 and my parents parents needed to marry me off as quickly as possible. After the wedding, I actually decided to go back to my parents' house. My new husband showed up a couple of days later and said, "Let's go." So off we went 3 hours away to live with his parents. Like I mentioned in part 1, they are a very wealthy family. This means their house is huge. In fact, they had a whole separate wing just for us. Apparently, they had been saving this wing for when he got married. This meant I saw my mother and father-in-law every single day. We would all usually have breakfast. I decided to get back into school. So off I'd go to school all day. Once I'd get home, I'd have a workout, cook, and go to bed. I was okay with this for the first couple of weeks. Slowly, my mother-in-law started asking me to do favors around the house. And just to let you know, she had 2 live-in maids. Why did she need me to do all these things for her? For example, they would do lavish dinners every single Sunday for the entire family. After the dinner, she would ask me to pick up the plates from the table and take them to the kitchen. While the live-in maids would start cleaning up, she'd ask me to serve dessert. At first, I was okay with this. I wanted to be a good daughter-in-law, and I wanted to help. But eventually, she started asking me to help with the laundry and with cooking during the week. With my school schedule, it became too much. One day when she asked me to help out with cleaning the floors, I put my foot down and respectfully said, "I actually don't have time. I can try to do it this weekend, though." That's when she simply looked at me and walked away. The next thing I know, my husband's calling me in a rage. He accused me of being disrespectful to her and to the family. He then asked me that I should just clean whatever she wants me to clean. I told my parents all of this and they got really upset. My parents actually wanted me to come home, so I took one of their many cars and went straight to my parents. They really regret the arranged marriage. My husband, of course, did come looking for me, but all he told me and my parents was that I was an ungrateful wife. He told me I needed to go back to his house and that we would just work things out. I don't believe him. I didn't marry him to be a maid. Now his family is threatening to sue mine. So I decided to blast him on the internet for all their friends and family to see. They desperately asked me to take everything down, and I said I would as long as they left me alone. So I'm still technically married. Am I terrible for doing this? My mother-in-law treats me like a maid. My parents regret forcing me into an arranged marriage. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I said I mean on Instagram. It all started 2 years ago. I was turning 25 years old. To my parents, this meant I was really, really old. They needed to marry me off as quickly as humanly possible. Now, the problem was that I didn't want to get married. My plan was to be single for the rest of my life. You see, I want peace in my life. I don't want to have to deal with a man. But no. Our religion dictates that my parents can marry me off whenever they want. They came to me with the news that they found somebody for me. It was a wealthy family that lived 3 hours away from us. My parents are middle class. This family was upper class. My parents showed this guy a picture of me, and apparently he said that I needed to be his wife. And, quote, he would know how to take care of me. I begged my parents not to make me marry this guy, but at the same time, I knew I could not go against what they wanted. I couldn't just stay in their house forever. I met him and his family, and they were actually lovely people. I was shocked. I liked my mother-in-law. She was funny, spunky, and her and I connected right away. The marriage was planned in 3 months. Everything happened so quick. My mother-in-law did pretty much all the planning. All I had to do was say yes or no to everything. But here's what I didn't know. After we got married, we were supposed to move into his parents' house. They had a separate wing to their house that was only for us. This meant I had to see my mother-in-law every day. And things get really bad. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. I'll tell you that last month I made $60,000. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and send me on Instagram. So at the beginning I had to lie about my age. I'm really 36 years old, but I say I'm 22. I do look a lot younger than I am, and of course I get filler and Botox. I started my Instagram account 6 years ago. My inspirations were Anna Cherie, Amanda Lee, I Am JoJo, and Abigail Ratchford. I mean Abigail Ratchet. I basically copied all of these girls' pictures. Within a month of starting my Instagram account, I had 10,000 followers. And yes, all of them were males. But I didn't really start making money until 2018. You know, like every other girl on Instagram, I signed up for OF. And that's when I started making serious money. But I was also making money from Instagram. Brands would send me clothes and watches and protein powders, stuff like that. Eventually, I became an ambassador for one of the biggest Instagram clothing stores. I think we all know what I'm talking about. Fashion Hova, and I started making a lot of money then. So I basically started living above my means. I got myself a new apartment in Beverly Hills, and it was $6,000 a month. I also got myself a Mercedes, and I would exclusively shop at Air One. I would also go shopping at Rodeo Drive almost every day because I wanted the paparazzi to get pictures of me. And I even called the paparazzi on me a few times, so I had to pay them like $2,000 out of pocket. So yeah, I was spending a lot of money. Whatever money I got that month, I would literally spend it by the end. One month I spent $25,000 going out with friends. I would usually pick up the bill. This is what started getting me into trouble. Part 2 is story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. After I spent the $25,000 in 1 month, I decided I needed another income source. So I thought of escorting. One of my very good friends in LA was also an escort, and she told me about it, but I was like, I can't do that. But one day I called her and she told me everything. She gets contacted through Instagram by very, very rich men, like billionaires. I honestly didn't believe her at first, but then she showed me receipts. Her bank account had more than $1 million in it. She told me that she had only been doing it for 6 months. She put me in contact with several people and they had to verify a bunch of my stuff. Then after a week, I was finally in. I was really scared. I had to go get my passport renewed. This meant that I was going to be traveling internationally with men that I didn't know. A few days later, I get a message on Instagram from an account. The guy that owned this account was clearly very rich. It wasn't him contacting me, it was his assistant. He got my information and 2 days later, I was on a private plane. I landed in a foreign country and I spent the entire weekend with this guy. He didn't speak English. Basically took me around his city and showed me off for his friends. I honestly didn't feel uncomfortable at any point and he didn't try anything. In fact, he was actually super shy, but his friends on the other hand were really handsy. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how I became an Instagram model / escort for billionaires. That's when his friends started getting really handsy. We were in a really expensive high-rise and the apartment was literally worth millions. And I knew that all of these guys were used to getting whatever they wanted. One of the friends actually grabbed my arm and told me to sit on his lap, but I told him I couldn't. He wasn't the one that hired me to be there, so I had to go straight to the guy that hired me. I told him that his friends were making me uncomfortable and he said, okay, we should leave then. I was actually shocked that he listened to what I wanted. Now one of my regular clients and I travel with him almost every 2 months. So let me tell you how much he paid me. For the 3-day weekend, I ended up with $50,000. Yep, that's right. But let me tell you a little about the dark side of this. A few jobs later, I ended up with somebody who was completely crazy. I ended up going to Vegas with this guy. He was approximately 10 years younger than me and was filthy rich. But he was also a complete psycho. He bought me this whole outfit that he wanted me to wear the entire night. I told him I was more comfortable in my clothes. I was wearing a Fendi dress. It looked great. That's when he said, no, you're gonna wear this. I ended up walking around Vegas in a micro mini skirt and a bikini top. By the end of this night, he was getting really aggressive. I tried to stay quiet, hoping that he would just forget that I was in his car. Suddenly, he turned to look at me and wanted me to do something. When I said no, he grabbed me by the hair and told me that he owned me for the night. Then he said, I'll add an extra $20,000 in there for you. And it does get worse. But now I learned to save my money. I no longer pay for my friends' drinks and food. I still have my $6,000 apartment and I upgraded my car. I live like a princess. I also bought my parents a house though. It was definitely one of the happiest days of my life. And believe it or not, I actually did end up finding love. My boyfriend is okay with my job, but he just asked me to be safe. Of course, he asked me every day to quit because he wants to support me, but he can't give me the life I've given myself. What should I do? Caught my influencer boyfriend DMing girls on Instagram, and I just found out I'm pregnant. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sending me on Instagram. Influencer boyfriend is kind of famous on TikTok. See, he's one of those pretty boys. He and I have been together for 6 months. I started showing up in his videos a couple of years ago, and I knew that I liked him ever since then, but he never wanted to be exclusive because he wanted to be an F-boy. I let it happen, let him use me, but after a while I told him that I needed something more. It was like pulling teeth out of his mouth to get him to go exclusive with me. We've been living together, and 4 weeks ago we found out I was pregnant. He was actually happier than I was, which surprised me. But out of nowhere, I got a DM from a random girl, and her DM read, girl to girl, I don't think this is right. I'm sorry to be the one to show you this. Here's the DM your boyfriend sent me. His DM to her said, girl, you must be tired because you've been running around my mind all day. LOL. I literally had secondhand embarrassment, but I was crushed. At this point, he had joked around about maybe putting a ring on it. Now I knew that he might possibly be talking to girls, not after he found out that I was pregnant. I want to blast him on the internet so bad, but I depend on him financially. My best friend doesn't want me to tell him anything. He wants me to pretend like it didn't happen, because if we break up, he has no financial obligation towards me. I think she might be right. If we broke up, he'd probably kick me out of his house, take away my car, and stop giving me money. I give this man the wifey treatment. I do everything for him. Should I confront him? Self-care sister. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I don't trust her one bit. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost a year. When I met him, he already had a very big group of best friends. One of them was this girl. There's actually another girl in the group, but my boyfriend and this particular girl, let's call her Lacey. Lacey is completely obsessed with my boyfriend. I tell him all the time, but he doesn't want to listen to me. She goes out of her way to spend time with him, and she'll do girlfriend things for him. Sometimes she'll call him and say, I cooked us dinner, come over to my apartment. She even goes to his apartment and helps him do laundry. Let me go back though. When we started dating, he asked me not to be uncomfortable and that him and her were only good friends. But as soon as I saw them with each other, it was visible that she was in love with him. When he first brought me around to meet his friends, she was super territorial. She would sit next to him and even sat on his lap in front of me. And this made my boyfriend uncomfortable. He asked her to sit on a chair instead of his lap. After that, I asked him if he had feelings for her and he said no. He said he's only ever seen her as a sister, that the thought of hooking up with her makes him want to vomit. Lacey reached out to me and asked me to have lunch with her. Throughout the whole lunch, all she talked about was my boyfriend, and how amazing he is, and how only a good girl deserves him. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I don't trust her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, I was sending me on Instagram. When her and I went to lunch, all she talked about was my boyfriend. That's when she started saying things like, he only deserves a really good girl. That's when I was straight up with her. I told her that he had already chosen me because he loved me, and that I didn't need her to tell me what my boyfriend needed. You guys should have seen the look on this girl's face. She was shocked that I would defend myself and even talk back to her. Then she said, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel bad. I told her that I didn't feel bad and that I knew what she was doing. She was basically trying trying to intimidate me and make me feel that I wasn't good enough for my boyfriend. She denied it and started apologizing. But at least I made it clear to her that I was not stupid and that she was not gonna walk all over me like she probably did with all of his exes. By the way, one of his past girlfriends actually broke up with her because of this girl. I mean, Lacey. Found this out through one of the other friends. They told me that I needed to be careful with her, and that's why I was prepared to go to lunch with her. Guess what happened though? I called my boyfriend to say hi to him, and that's when he starts yelling at me. He said Lacey called him to tell him that I had attacked her at lunch, that I basically threatened her. I explained to him what happened from my point of view, and he said that she was probably just overreacting. But it was her word against mine. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I do not trust her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sent me on Instagram. After Lacey told my boyfriend that I had attacked her and threatened her, he told me to keep my distance. So I did. But that meant that he would hang out with her without me. I found this completely unacceptable. That's when I told my boyfriend that she was manipulative, that she had clearly planned everything out so that he and her could be alone. Then I told him that his ex-girlfriend left him because of her. He told me that I didn't know the full story and that I should mind my own business. That's when I noticed that he wouldn't come over to my apartment every day. And guess why? His best friend Lacey told him that she had a stalker and that she needed my boyfriend to stay over her house so that she could feel protected and safe. I just can't. I told him that she was clearly manipulating him and probably lying about the stalker situation so that he could spend more time with her. And just like that, 2 days later, he told me that they were moving in together and that she miraculously found an apartment big enough for the two of them. In 2 days? I don't think so. I think she had been planning this the whole time. And my boyfriend is just stupid enough to fall for it. I told him if he moved in with her that he should just forget about me. He begged me not to leave him, so I guess I'm still his girlfriend. He's still debating whether or not to move in with her. He says he doesn't want to lose me, but he wants to be able to be there for her. I think I should break up with him, but maybe there's another solution. What do you guys think I should do? My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I know you guys are gonna all say yes immediately, but hear me out. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 6 months. My best friend and I actually met him at a bar. That night, I never expected that he would ever come after me. I consider my best friend the prettier of the two of us, so I'm used to her getting hit on instead of me. But that night, my boyfriend came to me. He talked to me pretty much the entire night, and my best friend told me to go for it. So I did. He and I spent the night together, and after that, we were inseparable. To the point where he wanted me to move in with him after 2 months. My parents thought I was absolutely crazy and they didn't want me to move in with him, but I did anyway. I come from a Latino family, so this was absolutely reprehensible. I went against my family's wishes and they actually stopped speaking to me for a little bit, but luckily I got them back. My boyfriend during that time gave me all his support. He told me that my family would come around eventually and that they would see that we were in love. So living together was the logical next step. After 3 months of living together, I knew that I wanted to marry him, and he would talk about marriage all the time. He asked me what kind of ring I would want and what I would want for the proposal. We even started talking about our honeymoon. I was also starting to get in the best shape of my life. I was looking super snatched. My boyfriend told me that he loved the way that I look, but that he didn't want me to get skinny. Again, I just felt like he was supporting me and loving me. Around this time, my best friend started dating somebody. After a few weeks, they got really serious about the relationship. And of course, we went on double dates. After the third double date, I noticed that my boyfriend was getting a little annoyed. I got the feeling he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend. Follow for part 2. My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I asked him if he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend, and that's when he said no. But every time we would go on double dates, he would get in such a bad mood. 3 weeks ago, my best friend told me that she was moving in with her boyfriend. And when I told my boyfriend that they were moving in, his face almost went green. I asked him what was wrong, and he said nothing. After that, he went into the bathroom and didn't come out for 40 minutes. Again, I asked him if he was okay, and he said yeah. And I sat him down and asked him to be honest with me. That's when he said, I'm attracted to your best friend. Instantly started to cry because I had already been suspecting it. He explained to me that he didn't have any feelings for her until she got a boyfriend, and that he felt that he had some sort of ownership over her. Before my best friend got a boyfriend, the 3 of us would hang out a lot, and not once then did I ever get a feeling that he was attracted to her. He told me that he would never act on his feelings, but he didn't want to go on any more double dates. I asked him if he wanted to be with her instead of me, and he said absolutely not. He said that I was the love of his life and that attraction only meant attraction, that he didn't have feelings for her. A few days later, he took me to the most expensive restaurant in our city and asked me to marry him, but I didn't know what to say. I can't stop thinking that he's attracted to my best friend. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. What should I do? Disclaimer, is not my story time. Sending me on Instagram. After he proposed, I told him I didn't know what to say. He told me to think it over. I finally decided to tell my best friend what my boyfriend had told me, that he had confessed that he was attracted to her. First, she laughed. I told her no, I'm serious. He confessed that he's attracted to you. That's when she told me I needed to break up with him. That's when I told her that he had also proposed. And she said, well, then you really need to break up with him now. That's when she told me that she didn't want me to resent her and that it was completely out of her control. And I didn't. I promised her that I would never resent her for my boyfriend being attracted to her. It's not like she ever did anything on purpose to make him feel attracted. attracted. She also told me that marrying him right now would be rushing into it, and she's kind of right. We've only really known each other for 6 months. Then she told me that she's never gotten the feeling that he's attracted to her. She's never caught him looking at her or anything like that. So now her theory is that he's looking for an easy way out, and that he probably wants me to break up with him. But my boyfriend is still sweet and super affectionate. He's constantly showering me with love. My best friend thinks that if I stay with him, our relationship will suffer. I've known my best friend longer. What should I do? I pooped on my boyfriend's bed after I found out he was cheating on me, and I lit his car on fire. Disclaimers is not my story time instead of me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I met in high school. He chased me for about 3 years. This man would tell me every single day that he was in love with me. This was before Instagram, so he would contact me every single day through Facebook. He would send me his favorite songs. He would write me poems. I mean, you can tell this guy was totally obsessed, right? After 4 years of this, I finally said yes to a date. And the only reason I kept saying no was because I knew somebody that had dated him, and they told me that he was crazy. I just didn't want to believe it because he seemed so perfect over Facebook. At the time, I was living in Manhattan, so I told him that I wanted the date to be in the city. So he took me to watch a show on Broadway. First off, I was really impressed that he could even afford the tickets because they were to a very expensive show. And before the show, he took me to a really nice dinner. And he proceeded to order everything on the menu. 5 appetizers, 4 main entrees, and a bunch of drinks. The bill came out to about $600. I offered to help him pay, but he said no, as he should. The entire date was really amazing. The only thing that I know now was a red flag is that he was kind of rude to the waiter. Of course, I didn't mention it. Fast forward a few months, and he asked me to be his girlfriend. Now, to be honest, I was dating a few other guys at the time, and they were all really great, but none of them wanted a serious relationship, and that's what I was looking for. So I finally said yes to my ex. Around that time, I started competing in pageants, and I got very far. I went to Miss USA. Can you guess who I am? He loved this. Part 2 is up. I pooped on my boyfriend's bed after I found out he was cheating on me and lit his car on fire. Disclaimers is not my story time. I said on my Instagram. After he asked me to be his girlfriend, I decided to start competing in pageants, and I got pretty far. I won my state and went on to Miss USA. At that point, my ex and I had been together for about a year. To my face, he always told me that he was so proud of me. He loved that I was so dedicated and disciplined. To get ready to compete, I would work out twice a day. I also had a bunch of classes and held down a full-time job. Here's when things start getting complicated. One night, our friends had a get-together at their house. Our entire friend group were there, and I invited my best friend. Now, my best friend has always had my back. He is my ride or die. Her and I went to the kitchen to get some drinks, and when she went back to where my boyfriend was standing, she overheard the conversation he was having with another friend. Apparently, my boyfriend was telling the other friend that I was crazy, that he thought I had eating disorders because I would work out so much, and that I thought I was better than everybody else because I was competing for Miss USA. My best friend ran over to the kitchen to tell me everything she heard. At first, I thought, are you sure he wasn't joking? She said no, he was completely serious. I was really hurt. Instead of waiting for the party to be over, I confronted him right then and there. Asked him if he was talking bad about me, and then he said no, of course not. And I told him the whole conversation that my best friend overheard. But I told him that I was the one that overheard the conversation. That's when he started gaslighting me. He said that I was overreacting, that I had completely twisted his words. I asked him exactly what he said, and he told me he couldn't remember. I asked him point blank if he felt envious of me, and he said no. He said, you have to get over yourself if you think you're that important. Part 3 is I pooped on my boyfriend's bed after I found out he was cheating on me and lit his car on fire. Disclaimers is not my story time instead of me on Instagram. After I caught him talking bad about me, he denied everything. And he also told me that I needed to get over myself. I grabbed my best friend and went home. That means my boyfriend stayed at the party by himself. Well, guess what he does? He goes out of his way to find a girl to hook up with. And I know this now because a few of my friends who were at the party saw everything go down. Apparently, after I left, he started scouting all the girls. He would go up to each one of them and talk to them. Finally, he went upstairs with one of them. I mean, he couldn't even go somewhere else. He had to do it in front of all of our friends. Multiple people watched this all happen, and most of them knew that we had gotten into a fight before. One of the girls that was at the party actually messaged me and told me that my boyfriend was in the bedroom with another girl. So I ran back to the party. He was already downstairs at that point, but I asked him if it was true. At this point, he had a lot to drink. That's when he starts word vomiting, telling me that he had hooked up with girls that were way better than I was, and that I was so consumed with my pageant competition and that I was too skinny. Then he just started listing all of the girls that he had slept with, and 2 of them were my friends who were at the party. What I did next is probably not the best idea, but I did it. I grabbed a bottle of alcohol and went outside with the lighter. I poured it all over his car and set it on fire. Then I got back into my car with my best friend and went to his apartment. And it just so happens that I needed to poop at the time. So I thought just to do it in his bed. So I squatted over his bed and did my business. Then he messaged me telling me that he was going to press charges on me for his car. Luckily, nobody told on me, so he had 0 proof. And luckily, his car was fine. A few months later, he messaged me apologizing. He said that I was the best thing that ever happened to him, but I ignored his messages. No, I didn't win Miss USA, but I'm proud of myself for what I did to him. Bye. My mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I said me on Instagram. My mother-in-law has done everything in her power to separate my boyfriend and I. And though she doesn't admit it, she loves it. When my boyfriend and I started dating, we were both really happy, really loving and affectionate. We love to spend time with each other, so our relationship is really well-rounded. In fact, my boyfriend comes to my apartment every single day. Without me asking him, he always just wants to spend time with me. After 3 weeks of dating, we decided we'd meet each other's parents. Even though he was incredibly nervous to meet my parents, they went out of their way to make him feel at home. My parents had invited us over for dinner, and they literally made his favorite foods and even bought his favorite dessert. Needless to say, my parents loved him and he loved my parents. The following week, we met his parents. It went okay, I guess. His parents wanted to take us out to dinner, which was nice. His dad was super charismatic, funny, and made a lot of conversation. His mom hugged me and kissed me, so I thought she was okay. But throughout the dinner, she would kind of look at me and not really say anything. Basically, she only responded when my boyfriend talked. Obviously, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I didn't tell my boyfriend anything. Next day, I get a text message from my mother-in-law. She asked me to have lunch with her. Just the two of us. Part 2 is up. My mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, it's not my story time. I said me on Instagram. She asked me out to have lunch by ourselves. I said yes. During the lunch, she took me to this really fancy restaurant, and she did not tell me that it was so fancy. So I showed up in jeans and a cardigan. As soon as she sees me, she says, "Oh, why didn't you wear a dress?" I told her I didn't realize the restaurant was so fancy, and I apologized. She said it was okay and for me to sit down quickly. By the way, my boyfriend's family has a lot of money, so she's accustomed to the, nicer things in life. Not so bad sitting in that restaurant with my cheap jeans and my cardigan, while everyone else was in dresses and beautiful sandals. We made small talk and it was actually kind of nice. After we ordered, she started asking me questions though. She started asking me how many boyfriends I'd had in the past, what my friends were like, and she even asked me how much money I earned per year. She was clearly trying to find out if I was only interested in her son's money, which no, I'm not. Then she asked me if I wanted to have kids. I mean, this isn't even a conversation that I've had with my boyfriend yet, so to have it with his mom felt just strange. I told her in the future I definitely wanted to have kids, but not anytime soon. That's when she said that's such a shame. I want grandchildren within 2 years. I laughed and told her that her son and I hadn't even spoken about marriage. We hadn't been together very long. When the bill came, of course I offered to pay for it, but she said, "No, darling, that's okay." But when she looked at the bill, she said, "Wow, that's a lot." Mind you, she was the one ordering the expensive drinks. An hour later, I got a text message from my boyfriend. He said his mom came home crying after having lunch with me. She told him that I was rude to her, that I didn't offer to pay. Part 3. My mother-in-law is so terrible that I want to break up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. That's when my boyfriend told me that his mom came home crying after she had lunch with me. She said that I didn't offer to pay for the bill and that I was rude to her. Of course, I quickly defended myself and told him that never happened. I did offer to pay for the bill. He told me that I needed to give her some time. So a few days later, I went to their house and apologized to her personally. I told her that I was sorry if I had done anything to offend her. She told me that I just needed to be a little more sensitive. So after that, I did not speak to her at all. But she noticed every time I would go over to their house, she would make comments about my clothes, my hair. On one occasion, she hugged me and grabbed my arm. That's when she said, "Wow, from far away it looks like you're thin, but you don't feel very thin." I laughed hysterically. Obviously she wanted to hurt my feelings, but I just thought it was funny. One occasion she brought up my boyfriend's ex, only to insinuate that I wasn't as pretty as her. I laughed at her comment and didn't say anything. She once came over to my boyfriend's apartment while I was cooking and literally proceeded to take over and judge everything that I was doing. She told me that my food was too plain and that she felt bad for my boyfriend, and that obviously he had lost weight because of how terrible my food was. The last straw was when she told my boyfriend that I was talking to somebody on the phone. I told my boyfriend I was talking to my mom, and she told him that she thought it was a man. I know it's not my boyfriend's fault, but he always sides with her. I'm always at a loss. What should I do? Story time about how I found my husband's secret phone. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I found 5 dating apps and 2 secret girlfriends on his phone. And I can't even begin to tell you what I found on Instagram. Up until this point, my husband and I had the utmost respect and trust for each other. I never once thought he was capable of doing this. Literally every woman says that when they find out their man is cheating. Around 6 months ago, my husband started a new job. He's in tech and makes a lot of money, so I've been able to stay at home with our kids. We now have 2 kids, and they're both 2 and 5. Our life is amazing. Our parents live near us. We always make time for each other and go out on dates. We even take solo trips on the weekends. Last year, we went to Bali for 2 weeks. My point is, we always make time for each other. When he started his new job, he started earning more money. But this also meant that he took on a lot more work. He was always so stressed out. My husband and I met in college and we studied the exact same thing. We both worked for the same company. Eventually, I retired to take care of our kids. So when he got his new job, I offered to help him out with his work. He was actually really grateful for this, and we were both doing a really good job. He was working from home 3 days out of the week. So it was a great situation. We were spending time together, working together, and the kids were spending more time with their dad. His new job gave him a new cell phone, and this is the cell phone that I would usually use to help him out with his work and his laptop. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I found my husband's secret cell phone, his 2 girlfriends, and his 5 dating apps. Disclaimers, is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. I started using his work cell phone to help him out with his job, and he kept his own cell phone. This is when I started noticing that he would make a big deal about losing his phone. Anytime he would misplace it, he would go absolutely berserk. Now, I thought it was just because he was stressed about work, until I realized it wasn't stress. He forgot to silence his phone one night, and the notifications were going off. I woke him up and asked him to turn it off. My mind did not go to him cheating. I thought it was work-related stuff. Then I realized it was his personal phone that was going off, not his work phone. The next day, he apologized for having his work notifications on, and I said, but it wasn't your work phone, it was your personal phone. And he said, no, it wasn't. And I said, yes, it was. And that's when he accused me of being paranoid and crazy, and that's when I knew he was cheating. I had to keep it cool though. I was feeding the kids in the kitchen when this all happened. On this day, he was gonna go to work. I knew that he was gonna take his personal and his work phone with him to the office. So what I did was change the phone covers on each phone and flip them upside down. He grabbed the work phone thinking it was his personal phone. He put it in his pocket and went to the bathroom. And he left his work phone, which was his personal phone, on the countertop. I told him that maybe I should keep it just in case I needed to answer emails, and he said yes. He left and I had his phone all to myself. As soon as I opened his personal phone, I went straight to the messages and I found his 2 girlfriends, Laura and Missy. Part 3 is Storytime about how I found my husband's secret phone, his 2 girlfriends, and his 5 dating apps. Disclaimers are not my storytime, instead I mean Instagram. I started reading through the text messages between his 2 girlfriends. I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. He had been together with the first girl for 2 months and the second girl just for 3 weeks. And in the messages, he was totally bad-mouthing me. He was telling them that I was crazy and abusive, and that's how he justified his cheating to them. I also read in some of the messages that he was complaining about our kids, how spoiled and ungrateful my kids were, and that's why he wanted to escape the house to be with them. Let me tell you, our kids are so considerate and so loving towards us. They're very affectionate children, and they never get upset at their dad whenever he has to go to work. So for him to be talking badly about our children just made everything 10 times worse. After reading the messages for about 2 or 3 minutes, I went to the bathroom and vomited. I was physically ill. His messages were so perverted too. I know that when you start a new relationship, you're always trying to impress people, but he just took it too far. After I vomited, I went back to his phone and kept reading the messages. This is when I found out that he was paying both of these girls rents. So the whole time I'm helping him with his job to earn money for our family, half of that was going to these women. I got sick again. After I calmed down for a few minutes, I went back to his phone. Then I found his dating apps. His dating profile was so disgusting too. He was all about fitness and mental health. He also claimed that he was single in his dating profiles. So on top of him cheating on me, he was cheating on his 2 girlfriends. This time I didn't bother reading all the messages he had in the dating apps, but I did notice that he was going on dates with multiple girls several times a week. Later on, I found out that the whole work situation was a lie. He was working from home the entire time, but going on dates. I took screenshots of everything and went straight to my lawyer. I filed for divorce that very same day. When my husband came home, I confronted him and he denied everything. Even with all the proof, he's still denying it. He's not speaking to our children, and you better believe I'm getting half of all his money. Bye. Storytime about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I, female, 25, have been married to my husband for 6 months. When we started dating, it was just casual. I never thought I would marry this man, but it happened. We had a pregnancy scare, and that's when he told me that if I was pregnant, that he would marry me. We took a few pregnancy tests, and most of them came out positive. So we were convinced we were having a kid together. Of course, he asked me to marry him, and not until 3 months later did we decide to go to the doctor. And as soon as we got to the doctor, they said, "You're not pregnant." We couldn't believe it, but nonetheless, we were still married. He and I weren't exactly soulmates. When we started dating, we had a lot of fun together, but my friends would always make comments about him possibly being gay. I never took him seriously because he was interested in me, a woman. Sometimes my male friends would say, "Oh, he stares at me a lot," or that he would ask them to go out for drinks by themselves. I thought he was just trying to be nice and getting to know my friends. Obviously, I was wrong. My twin brother and I don't have a really close relationship. We had a falling out when he found out that I was pregnant. He thought I was ruining my life by having a kid, but it turns out I wasn't pregnant. So we started getting close again. He would come over to our house and spend a lot of time with my husband and I. But then I realized that they were doing naughty things together. Follow for part 2. Storytime about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I would come home and find my twin brother on the couch with my husband. Of course, I just thought they were trying to get to know each other. I mean, we just got married and all. Got to the point where my brother was coming over to my place every single day, and my husband and him would hang out all day together. My husband works from home, so he's always there. I own my own business, so I'm usually not home before 3 p.m. Every time I would come home, my twin brother was already there. Actually, I told my twin brother he needed to give me and my new husband our privacy. That's when he said that I was overreacting and that he was just trying to get to know him. Then he said, "Are you jealous?" I looked him straight in the face and I said, "Why should I be jealous? You're my twin brother." Then he laughed, got up, and left my house. And just like that, I knew something was going on. In part 1, I told you guys about those friends that warned me about my husband being gay. I decided to call on my friends and ask them to tell me why they thought my husband might be gay. They gave me lists. And I started writing everything down, and everything started connecting. I'd come to the realization that I married a gay man and that he was possibly having an affair with my twin brother. I mean, could things get worse? I decided to confront my husband. What he told me literally shocked me. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I confronted my husband. He told me that my brother essentially had been following him around and wouldn't leave him alone. In other words, he was putting all the blame on my brother. But instead of believing him right away, I grilled him. Started asking him questions about his past, like why he had never had a relationship before me with another woman, why all of my friends, literally all of them, thought he was gay. Of course, he denied everything, so I got on the phone and called my brother. I asked him to come over really quick, and he did. And of course, I started interrogating him too. That's when I told my husband to repeat what he had told me. But he couldn't. He looked at my brother and said, sorry, I told her the truth. My brother said, which is? And my husband says, you won't leave me alone and that you've been harassing me. That's when my brother tried to swing at him. Then my brother spilled all the beans. He said that on my wedding night, my husband and him made out. And that after that, my brother would come to our house after I left every single morning to be with my husband and to do all the nasty things they wanted to do to each other. My brother told me that the one who started it was my husband. I looked at my husband and he couldn't deny anything. I divorced him the next day. My now ex is trying to convince my brother to be in a relationship with him, but he doesn't want to. And my dad is hunting my ex down. Bye. Story time about how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram account, not knowing it was really me. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. The funny thing is that when my boyfriend and I got together, I did not want the relationship. He begged me for 6 months to be his girlfriend. And you see, the only reason why I didn't want to was because I knew that he was a player. Every single one of my friends had basically gone out with him. I was just the last girl in the group to go out with him because I always kept saying no. And looking back, he was definitely obsessed with me because I never gave in to him. I was the girl that he couldn't have. During those 6 months, he would hit me up on Instagram every single day. Anytime I posted a story, he would automatically reply to it. He would like and comment on all of my pictures. We also had a lot of mutual friends, so we would end up at the same events and parties. And every time that he would see me in public, he would zero in on me. He would basically ignore all the other girls at the party and make me feel like I was the only one there. And he would constantly compliment me and tell me how beautiful I was, how attracted to me he was, how I was just so different from all the other girls that he had gone out with. Trust me, I knew that he was love bombing me, but eventually after 6 months, I was like, he's gotta be honest. So I decided to give him a chance. And let me tell you, he has been the perfect boyfriend. He's so sweet and considerate. My parents absolutely adore him, and my mom never likes anybody. See, I come from a Latino family. One day I decided to make a second Instagram account. It was just an inspiration account. I posted cute outfits of other people I liked, makeup, nails. Till one day I see my boyfriend in my DMs. Part 2 is Part 2 of how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram and not knowing it was actually me. Disclaimers did on my story time, was sending me on Instagram. That's when I opened up my account to see that my boyfriend had DM'd me. First I thought he was joking. When I clicked into the message and I read it, my heart and my stomach sank. He was taking a shot. He thought that I was some sort of influencer. Now when I created the second account, I was already with him. But I really didn't tell him that I was creating it. It was just for fun for myself. I did start gaining followers. I did put in a lot of work into this account, but it was pretty much a visual diary just for me. It just so happens that other girls liked the aesthetic and I started gaining a lot of followers. I had about 10,000. But here's my theory. Since my account is probably listed to be in the area that he is, probably popped up on one of his mutual lists or his explore page or something like that, because I was trying to figure out how he found the account. The message read, "Hey beautiful, I really love your pictures and love your style. I'm also really into fashion. Lol, no he's not. And I would love to take you out on a date. I know all the good spots around the city. Let me know if you're down." So when I clicked on my boyfriend's profile and realized that he had hidden all of the pictures we had together. So if he had DM'd any girl and she went to look at his profile, she would automatically assume that he's single because he doesn't have a picture of another girl. Instead of freaking out and calling him, I decided to keep cool. Instead, I called my mom. She told me to play along with the conversation. So that's what I did. Messaged him back and said, "Wow, I really love your pictures and your style too. What's your favorite designer?" He replied, "Louis Vuitton." Ew. By the end of the conversation, we had a date for that night. And I showed up. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram account, not knowing it was me. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. At the end of the conversation he thought he was having with some other girl, we had decided to go on a date. And like I said, I was playing along, so I was super nice to him. I complimented all the clothes that he wore. I told him that he looked so attractive in his pictures and that I was really looking forward to meeting him. Chose a restaurant downtown. And of course he did, because I live nowhere near that area. In fact, he and I never go out on dates there. So he knew that he wouldn't see anybody he knew. Here's where it gets actually really funny. This man sent a picture of the outfit he wanted to wear. A brown fedora with the Louis Vuitton monogram on it, a Louis Vuitton belt, black pants, and a black shirt. So I replied saying, "That's perfect. I'll wear a black dress and my favorite Louis Vuitton purse." But I was still heartbroken. Here's what I did. I asked my mom to come with me to the restaurant. Her and I did our makeup, our hair, and we got dressed up really, really nice. And I decided to wear a black dress. My mom actually happened to have an old Louis Vuitton purse in her closet that she never wore, so I grabbed it. My mom and I show up to the restaurant and my boyfriend is already there. So I decided to walk in and turn around. So that way he could only see my back. My mom decided to stay outside of the restaurant, but she knew to come in as soon as he saw me. I suddenly feel a tap on my shoulder and that's when I turn around. He says, "Oh, hey babe, what are you doing here?" The look on this man's face was of pure fear. That's when I hand him my phone so that he could see that the account that he was messaging was actually mine. That's when he says, "You lied to me?" He was mad at me for pretending to be somebody else. Then he started apologizing, and then he said that he knew the whole time and that he was just joking around. I broke up with him and haven't spoken to him since. Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Should I leave him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. So sad about the palette. My fiance and I met a few years ago through friends. When we first met each other, I had a really bad first impression of him. First off, he was completely up himself. All he did was talk about himself and never once asked me questions. We were surrounded by other people, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt when he asked me out. I said yes, but our first date was kind of the same. He only really talked about himself, his career, the things he likes to do, his favorite foods, his family, his dog. I eventually just started volunteering information because he wouldn't really ask me. After our date, I didn't speak to him for a full 2 weeks. I was really turned off by his attitude, but then he messaged me saying that he was really nervous and that he realizes that he probably could have been a little more talkative. I said, yeah, you could have been. I told him how I really felt and he did apologize and he asked me out to dinner again. This time I invited him to my apartment and he made us a full 4-course meal. By the way, he's a chef. Obviously, that night, I completely fell in love with him. He made all of my favorite foods, but the gourmet version. A few months later, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. There were still a few things that I didn't like about him, though. Like, he never really had anything to talk about other than himself. Exactly a year after we met, he decided to propose, and I said yes. But when I asked him to do things for the wedding, he says no. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, I sent him on Instagram. To be honest, when he asked me to marry him, I was totally blindsided. Honestly felt like our relationship was starting to get stale. So when he asked me to marry him, I was like, for real? He told me that I was the first person who ever made him feel important. And looking back, I realized that it's because he only talked about himself and I really let him talk about only himself. Anyway, he immediately said yes out of the excitement. But when I called my mom to tell her, I was actually crying. Which is like, okay, maybe I shouldn't marry him then. A few weeks into our engagement, we hadn't talked about planning at all. So I decided to ask him, like, what do you want the wedding to be like? That's when he told me that he didn't really care, but that he would just give me money for it. I mean, on one hand, that makes me really happy because I don't want my parents to have to pay for the wedding, and he has a lot of money. But on the other hand, I want him to be involved, especially for the food because he's a chef. I decided to hire a wedding planner because my job is extremely busy. I work in marketing. Asked him to go to a few meetings with me, he said no. When I finally found the perfect wedding planner, I asked my fiance if we could go have lunch with him, and he said no. This is when I blew up in his face. I asked him why he wasn't participating at all. That's when he told me that he was too busy at the restaurant, that he didn't have time to do anything with the wedding. I was like, okay, fine. When it came time to choosing the caterers, I demanded that he go with me. He told me that he would try to get off work, but he never did. Every time I tried to schedule it, he would say that he was busy with work. That's when I told him that his restaurant, which is super fancy, should just cater the whole wedding. And he said no. He told me they were way too busy and ready to get a Michelin star, so there was absolutely no way they could cater his wedding. That's when he said, you can handle it, I trust you. I went home and cried the entire night. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my fiance refuses to help me plan our wedding. Claimers to know my story time, I sent me on Instagram. After I got home and cried, he came home and asked me what was wrong. That's when I told him that he didn't seem excited about the wedding, and that leaving all the planning to me made me feel like I was his employee, as if I had nothing better to do, which I do have my career just like he has his. Not to mention the fact that me picking everything I want for our wedding makes it feel like it's my wedding and not ours. He told me that I was overreacting. He also said that he was excited for the wedding, but that he was too tired and too busy to even think about it. That's when I told him that I was really busy and I was really tired too. And he begrudgingly told me that he would carve out some time this week so that we could speak to some of the caterers. I told the wedding planner and he started setting up some meetings. But of course, my fiance canceled on the first 2. He did show up to the 3rd one, but all he did was criticize the food. Then we went cake tasting. I expected this to be fun. When my friends have had cake tastings for their wedding, they always have so much fun. As soon as we showed up to the cake shop, he asked me, where did you find this? That's when I told him that our planner had found it. He said it looked like a supermarket bakery. That's when I told him that I don't mind supermarket bakeries and that it was probably just as good as a French bakery. He laughed and said, wow, you're funny, babe. We tasted the cakes and he actually liked them. Thank God. But then he requested to go to more cake tastings. We ended up going to 5 other places. This was already too much for me. I got a new account at work and I'm still trying to lose weight for the wedding. So him making me run around trying to taste cake is like the straw that broke the camel's back. After 2 weeks, we finally decided on a cake flavor. Most people must have fun planning their weddings, right? But I just feel like I'm drowning. I have to make all the important decisions on my own. I decided to involve my mom and sister and they've helped me so much. Of course, the wedding planner is helping me too, but ultimately the decisions have to be made by me. He hasn't made any effort to help me with anything else. I kind of want to break up with him, but I feel like this isn't a big enough reason to break up with him. What should I do? Story time about how I kissed every teacher I ever had a crush on and never got caught. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. Growing up, I was a spoiled brat. My parents gave me literally everything I ever wanted. For my 15th birthday, I told my dad that if he didn't get me a BMW, I would run away. So on my 15th birthday, I got the BMW. My parents never said no to anything. One time I told my parents I wanted to have a party at my house and they said no. I threw a tantrum and started to cry. My dad pulled out his credit card and told me to stop crying and I could go buy whatever I wanted. And I pretty much maxed out his card. He did punish me for a month, but all he really took away was the TV. As you can see, I was completely entitled. And yes, looking back, I would love to punch myself. myself. I was a complete brat. When I got into high school, I went boy crazy. Parents told me they did not want me having boyfriends, but of course, I put up a fight. They had no choice but to let me have boyfriends. I would bring them over to my house all the time, and I would always take them up to my room and lock our door. My dad told me one time to open the door, and I wouldn't, so he just left me. Eventually, I got bored with all my boyfriends, so I would just break up with them. But one day, this new high school teacher comes in. We made eye contact for about 5 seconds. I was obsessed. Follow for part 2. Story time about how I kissed every high school teacher I had a crush on and never got caught. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's on Instagram. After we locked eyes for about 5 seconds, he looked away. But I was totally obsessed. He was like the most perfect guy I'd ever seen. And the first thing I did was go to his classroom. I knocked on the door, and as soon as he saw me, he smiled and said, "Come in." We talked for about 2 minutes, and he told me that he was only substituting. So I knew I needed to make my move really quick. Fortunately, I was not taking the classes that he was substituting, but I had to find a way to get close to him. So I started watching everything that he did. My school had a big outdoors area, and there were lots of tables around. And I noticed that he would go behind the library to eat his lunch. So I started going behind the library to eat my lunch. I decided to get there before he did so that it would be a coincidence. As soon as he saw me, he waved, but he sat at another table. So I grabbed my food and went over to sit with him. That's when I started asking him if he had a girlfriend. He got super red. This guy was blushing. And I knew right away that he probably had a crush on me. He basically didn't give me a yes or no about the girlfriend, but I didn't care. But I didn't want to make my move right away. He said for the next 3 days, I sat with him at lunch. Finally, he asked me, "Don't you have friends?" And I said yes, but they're all annoying. That's when I leaned in for the kiss. And no, he did not pull away. The kiss lasted for about 10 seconds. As soon as we pull away, he starts looking around to see if anybody saw. And he told me that I need to find someone my own age. By the way, he was 24, I was 17. Next day at lunch, I asked him if he wanted to go to my car. And we ended up kissing 3 more times that day. That's when he asked me for my phone number. Follow for part 3. Story time about how I kissed every teacher I had a crush on and never got caught. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. As we were sitting in my car kissing, he asked me for my number. Gave him my number, and that's when he said that because he's only a substitute teacher, we could still hang out outside of school. And I said, of course. But the following week, he was gone because the teacher he was substituting for was back. No, he never called me. A few months later, we had another substitute teacher, and this guy was also really good looking. He wasn't as good looking as the first one, but good enough to distract me. This time I got lucky. He was substituting for drama, and I took drama twice a week. So I knew that I was going to be seeing him often. First thing I needed to do was get him to notice me, but this took a lot longer than the other guy. For the first week, I would just try to talk to him, but he was not having it. He would literally tell me to just go sit down, but I couldn't give up. One day after class, I decided to stay late. I knew that he would be staying late as well, so I knew that was my in. I went up to him and asked him if I could help him out. He said yes, and he basically told me to put away some of the costuming. As we were doing that, I just started talking to him, and I swear to God, for a minute, this guy forgot that I was a student. We started talking about everything. By the end of the conversation, he told me that I was really mature, and that I made him laugh. So the next day I stayed after school with him again. This time we were backstage organizing props, and we were completely isolated. That's when I told him that I thought he was really cute and that he was probably a good kisser. Then he walks up to me and kisses me. Oh my God, the butterflies in my stomach. When he stopped kissing me, I pulled him in and kissed him again. That's when he came to his senses and told me that I needed to go home. So I did, and the following week he was not there. Apparently he had a family emergency, but we know it's a lie. Looking back on my behavior, I'm totally horrified. Where did I get the courage to do all the things I did? I never spoke to any of them again, but I did see one of them on Instagram. I did not follow him. He's now got a big beer belly. Ew. Definitely don't do what I did. If I could go back, I would not have done it. Bye. Story time about how I pooped on my boyfriend's bed because he cheated on me with his ex. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me to Instagram. I know that it's so gross, but I think it's justified and you guys are gonna agree with me. I met this man's at the doctor. At start, I know. Came in with a bad cold thinking I had COVID, but it was just a virus. He was there with his mom. Sitting in the waiting room and he keeps looking at me. Mind you, my nose is dripping and I feel absolutely disgusting, so I thought he was just like judging me. After about 20 minutes, he comes over to me and hands me his phone. Says, "Put your number in." I laughed and I was like, "Are you for real?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'd love to take you out on a date." And his mom looks over at me and waves at me. They both tricked me. Fast forward to about 6 months. Our relationship was pretty good. I would say the only problem we had was that he let his mother control his life. I mean, clearly, because he's such a mama's boy. But I tried not to let this deter me. I mean, I'm also close with my mom, but she doesn't try to control everything about my life. At this point, I had heard about his ex, and all he ever said was that they had a good relationship and that they were still amicable. To me, it was a good sign. He never spoke badly about her, but he never told me about why they broke up. All of his friends and I go to a bar one night, and there's this girl there, and this girl targets me the entire night. She sits next to me, is super nice, and we chat. I'm thinking at that point that she's just another friend. But then my boyfriend's best friend turns to me and says, "You know that's his ex, right?" At that point, I'm like, oh my God, no way. There's one thing about me that you need to know. I am not a jealous person. I am very, very secure. What I do require is complete respect. I look over at my boyfriend and I'm like, oh my gosh, you didn't tell me that this was your ex. He just laughs it off like nothing. Then his ex tells me, oh, we should go get lunch tomorrow. And I, of course, say yes. I mean, I didn't see a reason for me to say no. The following day, I show up to the freaking restaurant only to wait for her for an hour. She's an hour late. Luckily, I was doing work on my phone, so I kind of got distracted. But when she finally shows up, she starts talking trash about my boyfriend. And she's like, I need to spill all the tea. And here's where she insinuated that he had stolen money from her, he was not faithful, and that all he cared about was his mom. I was stunned, and to be honest, I did not believe her. I told her that I would need to experience those things for myself to be able to confirm it, but that I was sorry that that was her experience with him. A few seconds later, I look down, and she gets a message from my boyfriend. This is when she says, oh, and by the way, he's been seeing me for 3 weeks. And she tells me that every time he says he can't hang out with me, it's because he's hanging out with her. The reason that she was an hour late is because she was at his apartment. This is when I was really sick to my stomach, like literal diarrhea. She apologized and started to cry, as if she's the victim. And she hands me a key to his apartment and tells me that I should go over there and speak to him. When I show up, he's not there. Start looking around the apartment to find some evidence, and sure enough, I find her disgusting dirty ass thong in his hamper. Go to the bed, pull off the sheets, and there's a used you-know-what. And like I said, my stomach was already rumbling. I didn't even think about it twice. Got on top of the bed, pulled my pants down, squatted, and did my business. It was watery, and it was everywhere. I cleaned myself off and left the apartment. 2 hours later, he calls and tells me you'll never believe what happened. He tells me how he showed up to his apartment and somebody had taken a shit on the bed. So I convinced him that it was probably his ex, that she had told me that they had been having an affair. He swears up and down that she's telling a lie, that all she wants is for us to break up. So here's what I did. I hung up the phone and blocked him on everything. A liar will always be a liar, and a cheater will always be a cheater. Guess what? A few weeks later, they're engaged. Why would he waste my time like that? Self-care sister out. Am I the asshole for asking my fiance not to hang out with his female coworkers? Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. So send me your stories on Instagram. Fiance and I have been together for 3 years. He has never had a girlfriend before me. Never wanted to be in a relationship because he thought it would tie him down. When we first started hanging out, I told him that I definitely wanted a relationship and that I was looking for something serious. He told me that he was open to the idea. 4 months into the relationship, he still didn't want to call himself my boyfriend or me his girlfriend. Whenever we would go out together, he would always claim that I was his girlfriend to people. So that let me know that he liked me, but he wasn't ready for like a serious relationship. This is around the time when I brought up monogamy and he agreed that we should just be exclusive. And when he said that he wanted to be exclusive, I said that maybe we should just be boyfriend and girlfriend then. This is when he hesitated but said, okay, fine. First, I felt guilty for trying to rush him into a relationship, but if you're trying to cuff me up for 6 months, I need to know that you're going to be serious about me, which is fair enough. He was finally introducing me as his girlfriend. He also started posting me on his Instagram and his story. All of this made me feel really secure about the relationship, which was great. It's been a couple of years now and the relationship is pretty good. We really don't have a lot of conflicts except that he has a job that requires him to travel. He was actually offered a position where he doesn't have to travel, but it means that he has to move. That's when he asked me if I would be willing to move with him. Now, I never thought I would leave my hometown. I love where I live, my family is there, and I'm extremely close to my family. He made it really clear that he did not want a long-distance relationship. So essentially, I had to choose between breaking up or staying with him. I decided to move so that we could be together, but now I kind of regret it. His new job is great, he's earning a lot of money, I'm studying online. This means I'm home most of the time. It also means that it's been hard for me to make friends, but he, on the other hand, has amazing coworkers. Most of them are male except for 2 females. One is significantly older than him, and then the other one is about 5 years older than him. Him and his coworkers love going out after work, especially on the weekend. They all love to get together. Now, I have met his coworkers and the 2 women. The younger one is definitely a little bit flirty with him. When I noticed that she was flirting with him in front of me, I asked him if he'd gotten the feeling that she was attracted to him. He said no, but sometimes I see that she messages him after work. She'll offer to give him rides. At this point, we don't have a car because we just moved here. I told him I had a big problem with that and that she needed to stop messaging him, especially offering him rides. This is when he told me that I needed to stop being jealous. To me, it has nothing to do with jealousy. It's all about respect. I moved away from my family to be with him, and I expect him to respect me too, which means not hanging out with young female coworkers. A few days ago, I come home from the gym and he's getting ready to go out. When I asked him what he was doing, he said he was going to go to the bar with his friends. I asked him if the girl would be there and he said yes. But here's my problem. He didn't even invite me. He also didn't tell me he was going to the bar. I had to ask him where he was going. I asked him not to go to the bar because we hadn't spent a lot of time together, got really angry, and left anyway. He didn't care that I was crying, he still left. When he came back from the bar, he was kind of drunk and started apologizing. He told me that he was an asshole and that he shouldn't have done that, but he told me that he doesn't want to single her out or make her feel bad because they all work together and they're all coworkers. So essentially, he's saying that he's still going to hang out with her if she's around. So I packed my bags and came home. My parents don't want me to go back. What hurts me the most is that he hasn't been looking for me. Should I break up with him or should I give him another chance? Softcare sister out. Am I the asshole for breaking up my father's relationship with his much younger girlfriend? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. You think you know where the story is going, but you have no idea. My mom and dad's relationship was rocky to say the least. My father had liquid dependency issues, if you know what I mean. My dad married my mom when she was 17. He was 25. He is as toxic as it can get. When they got married, my mom was really naive and very young, and he basically gave her no say in the relationship, so she essentially had to do everything that he wanted her to do. If he wanted to move away, she had to go with him. And no, he didn't care if she missed her family. Once he got her far enough from her family, he started convincing my mom that she was worthless. The reason he did this was because he was insecure. See, my mom was actually a pageant beauty queen. She was beautiful that a lot of guys chased her around, and my dad hated this. He wanted her to believe that no other man would want her. 2 years after I was born, my mom finally got a divorce. Her and I moved away, and I didn't speak to my dad for another 10 years. He finally came around and asked me to have a relationship with him, which I did. My mom was okay with me having a relationship with him, but I was very careful. When I turned 24, he wanted me to be in his life more, so he started taking me out to lunch. I quickly realized how terrible he was. He would talk trash about my mom to me, and whenever I would stand up for her, he would get angry. After a while, he asked me if I wanted to meet his new girlfriend. I said sure, and he brought her to lunch. Next time I see him, he walks up to the table with a 20-year-old girl. Mind you, I'm 24. We had only been dating 2 months. But as soon as they sat down, I could tell that he was totally horrible to her. First off, he introduced her as his lady friend. And without mincing words, he said that she dropped out of school because she just wasn't smart enough, and that she didn't have a job because she was lazy. To this, she laughed and said, "That's not true, you know that." She was so embarrassed by the way he talked about her. Dad finally went to the bathroom, and I asked her if she was okay. She looked at me and started to cry. She said, "I'm sorry he said that." That's when I started spilling the beans. I told her everything about my dad, how horrible he was to my mother. I told her the relationship would only get worse. That's when she confessed that he's controlling her, and that he even got control of her accounts. So she basically can't touch her own money. It took me 3 weeks to convince her, but she finally broke up with him. Dad found out and called me a bitch. Do you think I did the right thing? Self-care sister out.
Storytime about how his side chick showed up to my house only to find out that I was also a side chick. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Finding out there was a second side chick made me vomit. You might just hate me by the time this story time is over, but hear me out. I'm 27 years old and I live with my parents. When I was 19 years old, I was SA'd. More specifically, I was raped. This basically turned me into a hermit. In other words, I could not leave my house and I could not be alone. My parents did their best to help me out. They even got me therapy, even though they actually don't believe in therapy. And thankfully, therapy did help. After about 3 years, I was able to go out on my own, and I was able to get a job. I started hanging out with my friends again, and I even decided to go back to school. This meant I was constantly busy. I actually landed a pretty good job, which meant that I was making some money, and my parents asked me if I wanted to move out. This to me was like my worst nightmare. There was no way I wanted to live by myself, but I appreciated the fact that my parents knew it would be the best thing for me. I actually did end up moving out for like 2 months, but I ran straight back home after one night I heard somebody knock on my door and then they were gone. My parents of course accepted me back into their house, and since then I haven't left. A few years after that, I graduated from school and I wanted to open up my own little business. My best friend and I went ahead and started our own business, and it was pretty successful. We were making cakes and a whole bunch of different things, and we basically catered to private parties. During this time, I started meeting a lot more people. And I also started getting hit on by a few of my clients, but I never went for anybody. My parents tried to convince me to open up to somebody, but I just couldn't. It was almost physically impossible for me to do that. Obviously because of my history, but also because a lot of these guys were super forward. They didn't care I was catering for their party. They just wanted to get my number right away. It obviously turned me off, so that was not going to happen. But one day I show up to a catering job and I meet him. And he is so polite, so sweet, and such a gentleman. But there was only one problem. He was married. Now, I'd love to tell you that his wife was a bitch, or that she was mean to him, or something like that. But nope, she was perfectly sweet and really beautiful too. After catering the party, he actually got my number because he needed to pay me. And this is when things just started happening. He asked me a question about some of the cupcakes that we served. I shared a recipe with him, and after that it was almost on a weekly basis that he would reach out and ask me something. Eventually it went from him asking me things to asking about me, and at first I was definitely questioning why he would ask me things, but my mom told me that he was probably interested in me. And as bad as it sounds, yes, he was married. My mom was encouraging me to talk to him. I think at this point my parents were just so desperate for me to find somebody that they didn't care if he was a married man. His wife and him actually used my catering service again, and I was able to see him after a few months. During the catering event, he took it upon himself to help me and my friend. He helped us unload the car and helped us in the setup. It was after this that he reached out and asked me if I wanted to get a coffee. I went, and then my life changed. He basically opened up to me and told me that he was really unhappy in his marriage, and that for the first time he was feeling something for somebody. Me. I know it sounds terrible because he's married, but for the first time I was feeling something for somebody after so long. I didn't want to just let it go. When he asked me if he could see me again, I said yes, and we became friends. And after that, we became lovers. He also became my best friend, and he also gave me the confidence to start doing more things on my own. Other than my parents, I never had anybody encourage me to do anything on my own. It made me feel like he had my best interest at heart. Months are going by, and I'm falling more and more in love with him. After a while, I asked him if he wanted to be honest with his wife about our relationship, and he said no. He said that if they ever were to divorce, that he would lose a lot of money. And he also had kids and he didn't want to hurt them, so I just let it go. This is when I started noticing that he was acting strange, and he stopped trying to see me every single day. He started seeing me about 3 times a week. Then one day, a girl shows up to my house. Young and pretty like me. In fact, she looked a lot like me. He obviously has a type. She knocks on my door, and as soon as I open, she starts yelling. Then she tells me that she's seeing my boyfriend and that I need to break up with him because she's in love with him. At first, I thought she was confused. I was convinced she had the wrong house. That is until she pulled out her phone and started showing me pictures of them together. Pictures in compromising positions. My stomach started to hurt so bad I actually had to sit down on the floor. This is when she realized that I had no idea what she was talking about. But that's when I let her know that I was also a side chick. She simply walked away and said nothing to me. I obviously grabbed my phone and called him right away, but he didn't answer. And she asked me if I want to go with her to talk to him. I was like, sure. I couldn't believe he had a second side chick. I wasn't special anymore because it meant that everything he was doing with me, he was also doing with her. We show up to his place, but nobody was home. He finally messaged me 3 days later. He said he went on vacation with his wife and forgot to tell me. When I confronted him about the second side chick, he said that she was lying. Then I told him I saw all the pictures. Then he said that he would break up with her and stay with me. He even promised that he would leave his wife. At this point, I don't believe anything he says. But I'm so in love with him, and because of my history, there's no way I could ever be interested in anyone else. Should I take him back? I feel like I have no other choice.